It was a crisp, overcast November afternoon in Chicago. The bustling city had an energy all its own, a mix of hurried commuters, tourists, and the usual mix of Chicago's energetic crowds. Donald Trump, dressed in his signature long blue-black coat and red tie, had just finished a business meeting and was walking back to his hotel. He preferred to take in the city's sights on foot when he had the time. Something about the rhythm of the streets, the people, and the city's skyline always fascinated him. The streets were crowded as usual, with a steady hum of people going about their daily lives. As Trump strolled down Michigan Avenue, his attention was momentarily diverted. He had just passed the famous Millennium Park when he noticed something, or rather, someone that made him pause. On the corner, hunched against a tall building, was an elderly man. His clothes were old, worn, and torn, and his face was weathered by time and hardship. The man was sitting on the cold concrete, hands trembling as he held a cardboard sign. The sign was simple but poignant: "Veteran in need, please help." Trump's eyes narrowed as he took in the sight. The man's posture, his worn-out clothes, and the silent desperation in his eyes struck him deeply. He had seen many things in his life: success, power, luxury, but this was different. It was a stark reminder of the sacrifices made by those who served the country, only to be forgotten in their later years. Without hesitation, Trump slowed his pace, then stopped entirely. His gaze lingered on the man, and despite the growing crowd around him, he was drawn to the sad figure. Trump took a deep breath. "I can't just walk away from this," he thought, his instincts telling him that this was a moment he couldn't ignore. He stepped off the sidewalk, making his way towards the man. As he got closer, the crowd seemed to part, people noticing the former president's presence. Trump paid no attention to the curious stares. His focus was on the elderly man sitting on the ground. "Sir," Trump said gently, his voice cutting through the noise of the city. "What's your name?" The old man looked up, startled. He hadn't expected anyone, let alone someone like Donald Trump, to stop for him. His eyes, pale and weary, met Trump's, and there was a flicker of surprise and confusion before he spoke. "Henry," the man said in a raspy voice. "Henry Briggs." Trump knelt down in front of him, his face serious but kind. "Henry, I see you're a veteran," he said, nodding toward the sign. Henry's eyes softened for a moment, and he gave a faint nod. "Yeah. Army. 22 years. Saw some bad things. Got injured overseas. Came back, but, well, life hasn't been kind after that." His voice trailed off, and he looked away, clearly ashamed of his situation. Trump studied the man carefully. He was no stranger to stories of hardship, but something about Henry's expression, his sense of defeat, struck a chord deep inside him. "You served for over 2 decades. You've given your life to this country. Why are you out here?" Trump asked, his voice quieter now, as if he was trying to understand the man's journey. Henry shook his head slowly, his gaze drifting downward. "Lost my apartment a few months ago. Couldn't keep up with the rent. My pension just isn't enough. I've been trying to get back on my feet, but the world moves too fast. And I'm too old to keep up." Trump felt a deep ache in his chest. Here was a man who had dedicated his life to serving others, a man who had fought for his country only to be left to fade into the background of society. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. Trump looked around at the bustling crowd, feeling a rising sense of frustration. People were walking past, some barely glancing in Henry's direction, caught up in their own lives. It wasn't right. He shook his head, taking a decisive step forward. "Stay right here, Henry," Trump said firmly. "I'm going to fix this." With that, Trump reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He dialed a number, his tone already urgent. "Margaret," he said quickly, as the phone was answered, "I need you to find the nearest hotel with availability, one that can take someone on short notice. And get a doctor on the line. Someone who can do a quick checkup. This is urgent. Margaret, a trusted assistant who had worked with Trump for years, responded immediately. Of course, Mr. Trump. I'll handle it right away. Trump hung up the phone and returned to Henry, who was staring at him with a mixture of confusion and cautious hope. Help is on the way, Trump assured him. But first, let's get you something warm to eat. You've had a rough day. Trump flagged down a nearby food vendor who was selling hot soup and sandwiches from a cart. Trump bought Henry a steaming bowl of soup and a sandwich, handing it to him. The old man's hands trembled as he took it, but his eyes softened, grateful for the gesture. Trump sat down beside him on the sidewalk, watching as Henry slowly took small bites. Tell me more about your life, Henry. Your time in the army. Your family. How did you end up here? Trump asked, his voice gentle but curious. Henry hesitated for a moment, then sighed. I served in some tough places. Lost some good friends over there. Got injured in a firefight in Afghanistan. Had to retire early because of it. I thought things would get better when I came back, but the transition to civilian life wasn't easy. My wife passed away a few years ago, and since then, it's just been me, and no one else. His voice faltered, and he looked down embarrassed. Trump listened quietly, his eyes never leaving the man's face. He could feel the weight of the years, the losses, the disappointments, and the silent battles that Henry had fought both on the battlefield and in his own life. Just then, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, the sound of its engine purring in the quiet street. Trump looked up, nodding toward the vehicle. A little something I arranged, Trump said with a smile. Let's get you to a safe place. The driver stepped out, well-dressed and professional, and opened the door for Henry. Trump helped the elderly man to his feet, steadying him as he rose from the cold sidewalk. This is for you, Trump said gently. We're taking you somewhere safe. Henry hesitated, his eyes darting between Trump and the car. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice thick with emotion. You don't even know me. Trump looked Henry in the eye, his expression soft but firm. Because someone should have done this a long time ago, Henry. You gave so much to this country. You deserve more than this. The elderly man's eyes welled up with tears as he slowly nodded. I don't know how to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Trump said, his tone kind. You earned this a long time ago. The SUV drove them to a nearby luxury hotel, where staff members, already briefed by Margaret, were waiting. Henry was greeted with the kind of care and respect he had long been denied. He was escorted to a suite on the top floor of the hotel, where a hot shower, fresh clothes, and a warm bed awaited him. A doctor arrived soon after, examining Henry and providing medicine for his ailments. Trump stayed by Henry's side, making sure everything went smoothly. Meanwhile, Margaret had contacted Veterans United Support Services, a non-profit that specialized in helping homeless veterans reintegrate into society. Within an hour, a cheerful woman named Lisa arrived at the hotel. She introduced herself as the representative from the non-profit and sat down next to Henry. We're going to help you, Lisa said with a warm smile. We've got housing lined up for you, job training, and all the support you need. You're not alone anymore. Henry looked at her, his face filled with a mix of disbelief and gratitude. Then he turned to Trump, who stood quietly in the corner, observing the scene. I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Trump, he said softly. Trump stepped forward with a kind expression. You don't need to thank me, Henry. You gave your life for this country. This is just a small part of what you deserve. By the next morning, Henry had a new plan for his life. Veterans United had found him temporary housing, and Trump had arranged for his foundation to cover his rent for the first year. Trump even handed Henry a check to help with immediate expenses, ensuring that he could take the first steps toward rebuilding his life. As Trump prepared to leave, Henry, now feeling a renewed sense of hope, stopped him. Mr. Trump, he said, his voice steady, you've changed my life. I don't know what I would have done without you. Trump smiled, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. "You're going to be just fine, Henry. Just promise me one thing." Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you liked it, don't forget to hit that like button. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you never miss a new story from us.